Well, are you ready to become informed and be entertained?
Finally.
I'll see if I can find somebody that can take it.
I mean, you're
See, you're ready.
both.
I got my first laugh in the second line.
Just like
It's going to be a good evening. I feel like we should be having a group therapy session instead. Okay. Actor, director, filmographer, actress, wife, dancer, love of my life, actress, property goddess, new person, actress, I'm assuming. Are you in?
You probably don't remember, but you taught me at Governor's School of the Arts
You're kidding.
in like
Yeah.
2008. Oh my
No,
God.
you were a theater student or a dance student?
Theater, yeah.
My darling, I have taught 10,000 people in
I'm
my
sure.
life, and maybe 2 of them are memorable.
Wow.
Not you.
Nobody in this room.
Nobody in this room.
Mike or
No, that's not true.
Do not remember such a beautiful girl. Stunning.
What?
She's stunning.
Of course she is. She wasn't before she took Governor's School of the Arts with me.
Changed her completely.
He made her stunning.
I have to have a whole different approach here. I'm going to take the same thing substantively, but I know all of you, and I know all of you are either aspiring actors or love to act in community. Some of you have acted beyond the scope of this place and these environs. Let me ask you this. Let me start with this. What do you expect of this workshop? What are you hoping for? Anything other than
Education and entertainment.
education and entertainment? Let me see if I can find somebody to help.
Yeah.
So that's why you're here, and that's what you're waiting for. Okay, let's just dive into this. How many of you really and truly do enjoy reading Shakespeare? Sort of, kind of? How many of you feel like every time you read anything in Shakespeare's canon, that at some points, no matter how intelligent you are or how much you've read, that you're somehow being left a little bit behind? Okay? It's not an easy thing to read. Let me ask you this. When you look at, study, read, or try to enjoy a piece of Shakespearean text, do you do it in your head, mostly? Do you do it mentally? Do you ever embrace the text verbally, on your own? You read it out loud?
Well, after our workshop last night, I do. I had, it was my first experience. You know, I've never done any Shakespeare for any reason at all. And last night, the questions that were posed and the situations that happened caused me to realize that it's an active rather than a passive activity.
Okay, was it Leah's workshop last night?
No, this
Was Richard's? I did not get a chance to see his workshop. The first one, I think it was the first one, but I watched it in its entirety online. He's magnificent. He is a really and truly informed individual that knows his stuff, makes his case brilliantly, I thought, and you know, speaks Shakespearean truth, and can be trusted with absolutely everything he said. I have nothing but high praise for what I saw. I'll sort of reiterate what you're saying. I think that given a complex soliloquy or monologue, which is what we're going to work with tonight, we're going to work with the opening monologue of Richard III. First act, first scene, first line, and about 976 of them after that, time permitting. Okay? My hope is, and I'll use one of you as an example, probably the person with the least Shakespearean experience, to help me make my point and to show the progress that can be made if you take into account what I'm going to talk to you about tonight and try and put it into practice. Nobody's on the spot here. I really and truly would like the first read-through of this monologue to be done by someone that has no experience reading or performing Shakespeare. Okay? Don't be afraid. You know, nobody's going to make you look foolish. I think what I'm hoping will happen is that when we go through this and together make application of what I have on my page to the monologue that you will have in your hand and make notes on, the difference from the first reading, and Stephen will be recording, from the first reading to what you do, no matter how incrementally minute it might be, is going to show more understanding and more improvement. Let me tell you where this came from. Early on in my teaching career at Marshall, you know, I still don't consider myself a professional academic. I was a professional actor for 20 years, working with some of the best directors in film and television, from whom I learned much more than I ever learned in a classroom. And a lot of my thought process and a lot of my directing process comes from that, and somewhat my graduate acting degree in theater history, dramatic structure, dramatic criticism, and dramatic theory. But anyway, early on in my teaching career at Marshall, I had a very talented young lady, a good, potentially good actress, a very intuitive person that understood where things were coming from in life. I won't tell you her name, you know, because that's unnecessary. But I was directing a production of The Scottish Tragedy. And she did a reasonable, sensible reading of Lady M. And I cast her, because quite frankly, nobody came close to her, and she was a sophomore. I had her in a couple of classes, and so I knew her work ethic. I knew, you know, a number of things about her demeanor and the way she worked. So I had no, you know, I had no confidence. I had no qualms about her ability to try and embrace what it is I would give to her. Well, Lady M has a couple of those incomprehensible speeches. The convoluted, the hidden, the laden with obscure references and structures. And I started to think, some of this I learned as an undergraduate in my acting classes. And some of it I learned being out there in the real world with directors like George Abbott and Jerry Gutierrez and Robert Falls. I'm old enough to be everybody's father in this room. So some of those names may not resonate with you, but they were very, very good directors. And I was never one to hang out in the green room and chit-chat and snack and smoke. I was in the rehearsal hall sponging everything I could pick up. And what I'm going to share with you tonight is what I used and put together for myself from the little bit I already knew and from what I learned and from what I deduced from what I learned, and applied it to this young lady's work. And I'm not sure she ever really understood more of what she was saying but it sure as heck sounded like she did. It had practical and visible and audible results. And I think she understood a heck of a lot more than she did when we first went into rehearsal. But what she ended up with was something that sounded, for a sophomore in college, astonishingly good. It blew the department out of the water. They have not done a serious Shakespearean play in 25 years. It was the first Shakespeare of substance that they had attempted in 25 years, and everybody spoke to the nature of failure. And Connie, you saw it. You saw the reaction. I mean, of course, Linda too.
I saw it about 6 times.
You know,
It was worth
so you know
every minute of it. And Mike was in it, right?
No,
Oh.
Mike was just a twinkle in my eye.
Was that 95?
I came there in '93.
It had, I think it was 95, because Nick was about 12.
I saw it.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Of course you saw it because he did Fleance for me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw it in 101. That was one of our requirements, was to go
Oh,
see it, and I saw it in
okay,
101.
yeah. So you know what I'm speaking
Yeah.
of. I'm not inflating the success of it at all. I mean, it just for a college production that had never attempted that.
Wasn't she nominated for the Irene Ryan? Lady M? Oh, you probably don't remember that, but I think she was, because everybody was so impressed.
Yeah, I read mine.
The Irene Ryan Award? They nominated a person for each play.
I don't remember that.
I thought she was.
Of course, I don't remember a lot from Marshall. I sort of blocked most of it. In 11 years, I've been able to extricate all of that stuff and those people from my brain. I'm sorry. I shouldn't bring that in here. But anyway, that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. Okay? So it is a practical. It's a practical workshop. And I advise you to, you all have writing implements? Have we passed out
Yeah,
pencils?
if you need something to write with, let me know. Becky's got
I
some.
know,
I
I
got
was
you.
not prepared for that.
I brought some.
Thank you. That's what I used last night.
Okay. Somewhere on these sheets, there's a front and a back to this. Somewhere on this sheet, probably in the margins or something, I would suggest that you take some notes on what I say so that you can refer to them when we go back in. And we're going to work this together. Once I lay this information out, I'm not going to expect you to just try to look at what you're trying to remember and do it. I'm going to go through it with you. My page, when we work with this, God, my fingers, you're my hand to God. Please fix it. Just don't work. See, and we're going to do some scribbling, and we're going to do some arrows, and we're going to do some circling, and we're going to do some highlighting together. Now, I will admit to some understanding of this. This particular monologue was my monologue of choice for Have Prepared a Serious Shakespearean Monologue. My entire career as a professional actor for 20 years, and I made a lot of money with it. So it's very near and dear to my heart. But it has been 40 years since I had to address it, and it's also been a good 11 years before I've had to do anything academic, so I'm going to be as lost as you are. Okay, first piece of advice all the time is, if you're trying to read a large piece or any part of a Shakespearean text, forget your laziness. You really will not get from it what you're supposed to get from it in terms of how you want to embrace it, unless you look at, read, and try and absorb every footnote that is suggested in the text. All copies of Shakespeare's plays are done two ways. There's text, and at the bottom there's footnotes that relate to all of the not necessarily available or more obscure materials to inform you. You're going to find out that the best way to get something from it is to really understand all of the references and all of the implications. Now, this is a lot of work. I don't know many actors that bother to do this. Sometimes actors are very, very lazy people, and they want to absolutely depend only on their instinctive and innate talents to become brilliant with the material with which they have been entrusted. Moi included. So I'm not pointing any fingers before I point one to myself. But and then the second thing is, as you read through through a piece, if there are any legitimate words in the text, especially verbs, that are not common, that are not used every day, especially in the contemporary vernacular, you need to look them up for two reasons. You just might not even recognize what it is or have any idea of its meaning. And secondly, sometimes verbs are used to mean different things. The same verb can mean two almost antonymically structured things. And within the framework of the context, you need to understand what is being implied. So I've made a list from this particular monologue of all of the words and footnotes with brief explanations so that we understand that much of it before we even begin, okay? Try and find them in the text as we get through them. Lowered, L-O-U-R-E-D. I think it's in the third line, all right? It'll also end up being one of the stressed or important words as we read through the monologue. In current vernacular, it would be lowered, but it doesn't really imply enough in that context. Lowered means to be suspended above, okay? To fall upon or to be dropped upon. Now, this is another digression even as we get into it. in the context of Shakespearean poetry, think of the word lowered as opposed to, let's say, hung, very Germanic, ugly back of the throat, lingual, uvular, plosive, hung, as opposed to a word with two glides in it, lowered. It's just much more beautiful. Now, hung, I know, is one syllable. Lowered is two, for the part of it. But it's a lovely word, and that's what it means. The next one is barbed. Yeah, what line is it?
10, 11, 10, and 10,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, okay, barbed. Barbed means biting, or biting criticism or sarcasm. Instead of mounting barbed steeds, and it can also mean barbed, actually sort of, yes, stung or capered, capers.
It's 2 more lines down.
Yeah, he capers dimly in a lady's chamber. Capers means questionable act. He commits, what he's doing when he's capering needlessly, he's doing something extraneous or frivolous. Okay? Stamped, crushed. Stamped is crushed.
160.
Yeah, that I'm rudely stamped, crushed. He's referring to his figured body. Do we know Richard III? Are we familiar enough with it? He's a deformed king, probably other than Iago, in contention for the villainous character in the entire Shakespearean canon.
And
Yeah,
when I started to read this, all I could hear was Richard Dreyfuss's voice in The Goodbye Girl.
Oh, please. It's one of my favorite movies about show business. Wanton.
117.
Yeah, wanton is malicious or extravagant. Ambling nymph, of course, refers to a woman, a female. Dissembling means false appearance or hiding or disguising. Dissembling nature would be someone that is being false, purposely being false. To limp, times, being fashionable, peace, what the hell's the word limp? Anyway, halt means to limp. It doesn't mean to stop. In this context,
Oh,
it means
the first line of the second page.
okay. Dogs that bark at me as I halt by them, not meaning to stop and embrace them or the look of them, but to limp past them. Piping, the music of a pipe or a flute, that's easy enough to understand. And here it's spoken with derision in this monologue. Descant means counterpoint to a simple melody. Here, a comment. It's something in opposition to what is being played or sung musically. And basically it means the same thing here in terms of context. It's against what is being said or uttered. Inductions, meaning first steps.
About halfway down.
Inductions dangerous. Place Valade, inductions, meaning first steps that are dangerous. Mewed up means in prison, caged in prison. That's about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th line from the bottom. A fair proportion means a well-formed body. Okay, those are just some of the things that might have stumbled us if we went through it.
Where's that? That last one you said is where?
Fair proportion, cheated of his fair proportion.
Fifth from the bottom.
5th from the bottom.
Okay.
Okay.
And what did you say that means?
It means a well-formed body. I don't have a well-formed body. I don't have a fair proportion.
Right.
Generally, he's played with a slight, well, depending on who's playing him. Some people put their nose to their knees when they do it. He plays it with a crippled arm and hunched over, and he has a limp, halting, halts. And you know, a lot of actors choose to make it almost insignificant, and so part of his loathing of the world comes from the fact that he's not perfect. You know, that he uses it, this minor deficiency, to feed his hatred, and to some people it's almost unnoticeable. I prefer it, and I always played it with significant physical deformity. It just gives, in my work, my body feeds a lot of what I do and feel and say and how I work into a role. All right, now let's get to the nitty-gritty of how to begin attacking this. Punctuation. A comma deserves a breath. So if you see one, it reads like this: our stern alarms changed to merry meeting, our dreadful marches to delightful measures is a different punctuation. Or, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds, just a quick breath, like you might grab when you're singing. And the phrasing allows you to not, but just hang an extra little something to be able to hold out that last high C until the rafters come tumbling down. A period, a genuine count of one mentally. Now, you can't do this at first try, and it seems very mechanical, but you'll get the feel of it after a while. See if I can find a line with a comma and a period both. And of course I can't.
Second to last line of the entire play, or the entire monologue.
Brother, good day. What means this armored car that waits upon your grace? Yes, very simply. Brother, good day. What waits upon your armored grace? Almost an imperceptible difference. But as you sort of prepare it, literally make a count. A comma is a breath. A period is in your brain saying one, and then moving on, okay? A semicolon is halfway between a comma and a period. So it's almost imperceptible, but it has a much more significant a notion in terms of trying to read text orally. A semicolon is an indication of a subordinate clause being tied to a primary clause. So it needs to be linked one to the other. You need to find a way to tie that second clause into the first before the end of the sentence. So a semicolon should be read with a slight pause, but also with a slight inflection, so that at the end of a line, people don't think that you are starting a new thought. I think I can easily find one of these somewhere in here, because there are a number of them. Nor made to court an amorous looking glass. No, that's not a good one to show it. To strut before a wanton ambling nymph, I, that am curtailed in this fair proportion. You know, the nymph is not over. Nymph needs to be tied into the one before. Am I losing you, or is it making sense to you? A colon is generally suggests a list, not necessarily of just words, but often phrases separated by commas. So it indicates that. And consequently, again, you need to tie what follows a colon into the primary clause. It'll start to make sense when you start trying to do it. Question mark, rising inflection, same amount of pause as a period. Okay. That takes care of punctuation. And we'll go in and we'll try to apply all this to the monologue as we do it. Emphasis. It's really prominence given to a word or a syllable. In other words, just stress. There are ways of vocal prominence. You can make it louder or softer. You can do it with pace, slower or faster. or a combination of any of these things. You can do it with words that are onomatopoetic. That's another piece of advice I give you for understanding and making this language come to life. If there is onomatopoeia in any word, revel in it. It's a gift, okay? The other overlying rule of thumb is the most important word in any line is the verb. Play to the verb and play off of the verb. That is the core or the heart of the sentence. Sometimes the verbs he uses are very common, and so you don't have to do much with it. But some of the verbs, like capered, capered nimbly, you know, you can just hear it. It's like buzzing, you know, or howling. Relish in the word. It'll serve the purpose of the text, and it'll help make it come to life. All right. Now, other really important things to choose, to emphasize, again, not just with a hammer, but with vocalization, with rate, projection or quietness, are words that are within the same line repeated. If he repeats a word other than an insignificant pronoun, or something except in this speech, he uses the word I many of times, and each one of those I's is significant. But I that am not made of, all right? Each one of them needs to be emphasized some way. We'll encounter that very early on in the speech when we begin to go through it. It also applies to words that are antonymic in their structure between two lines. It's said, the one, winter, in one line, the other, summer, in the next. To make the point, or the image he's trying to make, you need to somehow find a way to emphasize again, not just with a hammer, but in some way, shape, or form, given the objects that we've talked about, or the methods we've talked about, to highlight the two of them. So that applies both for same words in the same line, or same words within the consecutive lines, or words that are antonyms in one line together, or in one line and the next, okay? Now, you can carry that further, and this always, I'm not even enough accomplished, I'll admit, to be able to do what I'm going to say, although some actors claim that they can. Sometimes those structures of antonymic structure or words, or similar or exact words, okay, extend into phrases. So there's not a repeat of the same word, especially in antonyms. The whole phrase sort of is an opposite one to the other in comparison, and somehow needs to be emphasized. I can't do it. If you can and you find a way to do it, all the power to you. When Alchemy Theatre has lectures next year, please volunteer, because you are much more adept at this than I am. You've discovered something I've never been able to conquer. I always find that it's kind of nice to be able to admit to class that you have a shortcoming. They have so much more respect for you, except for this one, and still haven't, forget it. Okay, here's another one. I forget the exact figure, but it's 90 or 90 plus words. And the sum total of every play that Shakespeare ever wrote are words of How many syllables?
One.
One syllable words. They dominate Shakespearean text. Just take a moment and read the first couple of lines and count them on your fingers. Okay? Which makes what I'm going to say next and and this I discovered myself. Nobody taught this to me. Which makes what I'm going to say next absolutely a gem. One, a mono or dual-syllabic words sort of count as one. Nothing special. But if there is a polysyllabic word in the text, it is there because it deserves to be emphasized. Why has he chosen to all of a sudden insert a polysyllabic word if indeed it doesn't deserve some sort of special attention? Take a look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down on the second page. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments. Okay? It deserves attention. To fright the souls of fearful adversaries. Yeah? Color it. Vocalize it, color it, speed it up, slow it down, articulate it, throw some sort of meaning to the meaning of the word adversaries.
Lascivious?
Lascivious. Yeah? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, got it? Okay. The same thing holds true for proper nouns. Specifically, and most importantly, if they are more than a syllable long, but most importantly, the first time they are mentioned in the text, especially names. Mentioning names for the first two, or, emphasizing names for the first two, 1, 2, or 3 times they appear are important because there's an enormous amount of exposition in a Shakespearean play early on. And the names are complex. Anybody here ever read any Restoration drama? Yeah? The names are so florid because the characters are so similar. There aren't 3 plots in all of Restoration drama. They're all the same. They're hiding behind a scene, doing dirty deeds, and they almost get caught and they get away. So, you have to, who was that? Oh yeah, we have to remember that Brunhilde is the slut. You have to make that connection or you're lost. But here too, it's especially important because there are a lot of names in Shakespearean plays because there are a lot of characters. And what sort of emphasizing the name for an audience or for yourself begins to, as you repeat it each time, begins to point out to you early on in the play who the truly important, influential people and significant people in the play are. And the last thing is, again, I love language. I think language is absolutely fascinating. I speak 3 of them. I'm most fluent in English. I spoke Polish for 5 years before I learned any English. I studied Russian in college, and if I gave it 5 or 6 months, I could again become fluent, but I've just said it by and by. I absolutely adore the notion of language. I think it is, first of all, the one thing that truly separates us from all other living creatures, although one would disagree. And my reaction, dolphins can speak, Yeah, 3 words. We have complex language. And so I'm excited about it. And I like the way it feels in my mouth. And I like the way you have to articulate it. So I'm really sort of tied into that. And this is not merely for emphasis or stress, but it's for enriching the material for yourself and for an audience if you're doing it. Watch for alliterative phrases and words, repeated sounds in a line, and somehow don't necessarily emphasize them, but as you read them, really like them. You know, let them impact on you in a very pleasing way. Because as actors, we all know that what you take in and what you feel as a person can emanate as performance fodder, can be used to send out. All right, that's the sum total of it. Now, when you look at all of this, and you look at a speech, and you think, let's identify all of this in this speech. It's ridiculous. 85% of the speech would have circles and stresses and arrows. So that's not what you do. There are a few that I think you must follow. Follow the punctuation rules, especially commas and periods. Remember that in a Shakespearean line of iambic pentameter, there is no descending inflection until there is a period, right? A sentence is not a full sentence until there's a period or a question mark or an exclamation point. A sentence is a sentence when that happens. If that doesn't happen, even if it's 3 lines of iambic pentameter, the sentence ain't over, which is why you pay real careful attention to the commas, because that's how you get through it, okay? Or, and so breath control also becomes enormously significant in the articulation of Shakespearean text. You just, who here sing? Rebecca, you're a singer, okay? And all of you sing. Mary's a singer. I don't know if you are or not. No? But we have excellent singers in this room. It's the same principle. You can't sustain the notes if there is no breath to do it. So, you know, you need to do that. You need to know how to conserve breath and how to use your diaphragm to slowly bring it up and to use only as much as you need for what the music requires. And the same thing here. So it's not anybody can just pick up a Shakespearean monologue and do it effectively, even if they understand all of it. It takes all of that. But our purpose here is to show that what I've given you, once we go through it, is going to, a second read-through, provide some significant difference between what we first hear and what we eventually do, okay? Now, I'm not going to take our real experienced actors to take that on. That wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't be able to show that because they would just know how to do it. So I need a volunteer that isn't going to be afraid to not be perfect at it and to go through this exercise with us and then to do it a second time after we have done it. So definitely not you, maybe not you, maybe you, maybe you, and not you.
I'm sorry, I have to go.
That's perfect.
Speak out, but
That's
not me.
perfect. Okay.
Not you.
Not me.
So not you. We've lost one of our not yous. Okay, I really don't care. I really don't care. I've given you this information, you really haven't
Well, he
taken.
said not me. Well, she's never done any Shakespeare.
Oh, that's great. But you've heard everything I said.
Yes.
And I know how much you like to please me, so you're gonna try.
I'll try.
There is no way we can do this, having been through this discussion, that we are not going to end up with some semblance of performance. So why don't we skip let's do the uninformed version and then the informed version. We'll just all work on it together, and then I'll ask a couple of people to do it, okay? All right, let's go back to the beginning and sort of think through and got what we've got going. Let me go in and find my pen, which is in the,
That's so funny, Tom. Having to leave, isn't that funny?
Perfect.
Nora, can I borrow
Yeah,
one of
of
your
course.
pens? Wait a minute, I got it.
There's a
Okay,
backup.
that's a pencil, I hate to use with a pencil. All right. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York. What do we got in those first two lines that jumps out at you?
Winter and summer.
Winter and summer, most definitely.
And 3-syllable discontent.
3-syllable discontent, winter,
Three-syllable
Summer.
glorious.
discontent,
Son of York.
son of York is a phrase. Let's bypass the phrase. Glorious is 3 syllables, which means you could colorize two together. Right? Made is not a terribly interesting verb, although it needs to be articulated clearly. And all the clouds that lowered, verb. Gorgeous, in the mouth, verb. Lowered. I would choose that one. In the deep bosom of the ocean buried. What do we got?
Buried.
And you have some alliteration there that's pretty interesting, although it's not back to
Bosom
back.
and buried.
Yeah, bosom and buried. Sounds like a title of a song. Bosom and buried, they sure got married. I would give some consideration to that. Of course, we're already emphasizing too many.
It
So let's do
continues
that.
on.
Let's do those two with a question mark.
If you go to the next line, it continues on with that B alliteration, borrows bound.
Yes, that's a much better choice. Let's not bosom and buried it. Let's do borrowed bound.
Do you think that
And I don't think that should be.
Do you
Huh?
think that victorious is an important word? I mean, it's a
Yes.
multi-syllable, and it sounds like maybe it should be emphasized because it's, it tells a situation, victorious situation.
It's a celebratory word. Yeah. Yes. And it meets the criteria for multi-syllable.
And when you say bruised arms, is the habit or the custom of pronouncing that bruised?
No,
Is that old?
there's no way in my typewriter to do an accent mark.
Uh-huh.
But if you scan it, you'll see our bruised arms hung up for monuments. It definitely is. It is read bruised, and that'll appear a couple of other times, and we'll point it out. And that's a result of the inefficiency of my typing. Okay. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments. Monuments deserve some coloration. 3-syllable word. Our stern alarms changed to merry meetings. What have we got there?
Merry meetings.
antithesis
Of
of stern.
Stern and merry, correct. That's the one I was looking at. Stern and merry.
And you get that again in the next line with dreadful marches and delightful measures.
Yes, correct, absolutely. Always. Let me see if I can sort of prioritize this for you. Where do we begin? Words repeated in a line or a second line, antonyms always, polysyllabic words are important. Proper names, especially to mention the first time. Onomatopoetic words are actor's choice. Okay, it's what you want to do with it. Illustrative word phrases are clustered. Alliterative word phrases or clusters, again, are actor's choice if you want to, and if you're not getting too many things you have to think about. And
Pardon me, but alarms, I do not know what that word is.
alarms.
Oh, it's just alarms?
Yeah, yeah, it's an archaic way
Of saying
of
alarms.
saying
Okay.
alarms. Alarms, or alarms.
I was reading it more as alarms and really confusing myself.
Alarms. Grim-visaged, war, and smoothed. Smoothed, it's a great verb and it's onomatopoetic. There's something to be done with that. There's wrinkled front. And now, instead of mounting, again, you've got an unclaimed accented syllable. And now, instead of mounting, barbed steeds. So that it's barbed, not barbed. To fright the souls of fearful adversaries. There's some value in colorizing fright and fearful for two reasons. It's alliterative, and I think you can do a lot with somehow emphasizing by vocalization, pitch, rate, or in some way, shape, or form, and fearful. The next line, of course, what? Yeah, a very interesting word, and it means being frivolous. He's being sarcastic and demeaning in the use of that verb. So there's all kinds of spin that you can put on it vocally. So capers is definitely, because it's a verb and because it's so colorful, deserving of some considerable emphasis. Lascivious, because what? It's polysyllabic, exactly. And again, it is it is replete with the possibility of vocalizing it in a way that suggests, yeah, you know, you can actually see the act of for your eyes.
It's alliterative with lute, too.
Yes, yes, exactly. The whole line is actually very, he's disgusted by it. You know, it makes him think ugly. Okay, now let's go back on what we've got so far, because we haven't paid any attention to punctuation. Make sure that you understand that. You've got a semicolon at the end of the second line, which means what? Somehow a tiny rising inflection. A glorious summer by this son of York. And oh, just a tiny, so that between this rising inflection, not like a question mark, what did you say? Not like that, but just a tiny lilt up ties it into the phrase. And all the clouds lowered upon the house. Lowered, okay, nothing there. Period, longer than a breath, comma, reads, a breath. Our bruised arms hung up for monuments, comma, breath. Sternal atoms change to many meetings. Now I'm saying it in bad Shakespearean language. Sternal atoms change to many meetings. I know a couple of actors that would do that. Some of them even locally. Oh, and dreadful, dreadful marches to delightful measures. End of thought, lowering inflection. A little bit longer pause. Grim-visaged war on the Monopoly smooth his wrinkled front, breath, and now, breath. That's an important breath. Has smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds, little tiny breath.
Is that like a turn there? And now it's kind of like a turn?
How do you mean turn? Yeah, meaning, I'm going to say something opposite of what I
Yes.
just said.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the implication of the line. Again, but I, not me, and these I's are important. Normally they are not, but used in this context, repeated what? 1, 2, 3. Next page, 4, 5,
6, 7,
6, okay?
8.
They're, each one of them, especially the ones separated from the rest of what the line by a comma, are punctuated. And each one, it's what you might call, I haven't mentioned this before, it's what is referred to as a ladder. When something is repeated like that a number of times in very close proximity, what is the most important I of all here?
One at the top, one you're getting to.
Typically the last one.
The last, right. In other words, those I's have to mount. So, as they say, don't shoot your wad on the first one. You gotta start at some place that leaves you someplace to go. Because the explosive I is the very last one, okay? Okay. Now, I think an interesting thing to do is to give you guys just a few minutes to go through the rest of it yourself and to pick out what you think should or might or needs to be received some form of attention, emphasis, vocal coloration, pauses, inflection, okay? Actual stress, to see what you come up with. And then, let's do this, although the entire monologue is very interesting. Let's do this. Let's have you do let's have everyone spend 5 minutes working with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. How can we possibly have any success if we're working with 13 lines? But then we can't do it for another, we've got to do like another 12 to get to an appropriate period. Let's keep our fingers crossed and do this. And then we'll work with 13 and we'll be okay. Prepare it. Because I would like Stephen to record everybody doing it.
Oh,
Don't panic.
doing what? I'm sorry.
The first 13 lines
On the first page?
on the first page.
Thank you.
First 13 lines on the first page. Just see what you come up with.
We're gonna have to do it.
Okay? And those that are the most frightened or apprehensive, go first, so you are not intimidated by the people that
Right.
might precede you. Yeah, Mike.
Quick thing real quick before people start really digging into it and re-record it. I think line 5 is supposed to be brows and not bars.
You're absolutely right. Now our brows bound, you're right. I don't know why I didn't catch that. I know why I didn't catch it. Because spelling correction, what is that called?
Borrows is a real word, so it doesn't catch.
Spell check.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, spell check screwed me. As I said, I must have done this monologue literally, with no exaggeration, in auditions 100 times. Probably more. Because I wouldn't want to count the number of auditions I did.
I wonder about that.
Okay, I'm giving you 5 minutes, and then we will begin. Hi, I'm Gene Anthony. I just taught a workshop relative to the use of Shakespeare's language and uttering Shakespearean text. And they've been through the lecture, and they have some things to apply to the work. I'm in here not to do it the right way or the informed way, but to do it just as an average guy on the street being handed a piece of paper. Hopefully, what they do will show that things have been enhanced. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound up with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, and our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war has smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Thank you.
My name's Alyssa Featheroff, and here's my interpretation. Okay. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
I am Becky McClelland, and here we go. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
My name is Linda Reynolds. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath soothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
Rebecca's sword. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by the sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
Joanna Murdock. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lured upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our boroughs bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute.
I'm Nora Ankrom. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York. All the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasings of a lute.
Hi, I'm Mike Murdock. This is Richard III, from Richard III. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths, our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarums changed to merry meetings, and our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed this wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fright the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly into a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasing of a lute. Like seeing everybody made sense. You know, you hear a lot of people, especially people read Shakespeare for the first time, and it doesn't seem like maybe they know what they're talking about, and that always comes through to an audience member, I think. And everybody got it, as far as I could tell. It seemed to me everybody got it. Everybody got it in different ways. Some people got it in the same ways. Some people got it took different ways, and took ways that I had never thought about and that I liked. But it's impressive to have a group of people that are looking at a monologue for the first time.
What you have to understand is none of them are axioms or rules.
Right.
Okay? They're tools. They're ways of doing something. And of course, just as people, you relate to some more than you do others. And to some, you don't relate at all. But there's a glut of them. There's a ton of things there. And you can choose what you want. The thing you should do is do this with another Shakespearean monologue. And record yourself doing it and listen back to it. Record yourself doing it before you do any work at all. Don't listen to it. Then do the work, choosing what you want to choose, doing what it is you want to do with it, record it, and then watch them both, one right after the other.
As an audience member, the thing I hate most when I go see Shakespeare is that they're saying the words and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
You know, they don't understand it and they're not making me understand it either, and I hate that. Because the language is beautiful in this. Everybody made sense. I knew what everybody was talking about. It was great. Good. I like it when it's like that.
And like Rich said the other day, you know, if you go see a production of Shakespeare and you don't understand what they're doing, it's not your fault.
Right.
It's their fault.
Right.
You know, it's the actor's fault, it's the director's fault, it's whoever, it's not you as the audience member, you know. So it's on us to figure it out and make sure we know what we're saying and that we're getting that across.
The thing that I really don't like in any Shakespearean tragedy, or in comedy, actually, as he pointed out, you know, there's comedy and tragedy, there's tragedy and comedy. It's absolutely true. You know, look at the Gravedigger in Hamlet, look at Lancelot Gobbo in The Merchant of Venice. Look at Feste, well, that is a comedy. Look at the Porter in the Scottish play. But the thing that really just makes me roll my eyes is unmotivated bombast and unnecessary gesture. You know, when somebody is just saying something and all of a sudden for no reason they just explode in this burst of anger or whatever it is. And it just comes from nowhere. Can't be justified. It doesn't, you know, what the hell are you doing? What, you know?
Starting here, starting now.
Everything's coming up road. Oh, God. God help us all. Anyway, thanks for putting up with me.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.